But this is the week-over-week analysis as normal, so let's get right into the numbers. 78 days closed on market this past week, a 4.91 month supply. Absorption rate was at 20.35. Average list price this past week, $724,026. Average sale price this past week, $652,754. And our list price to sale price retention came in at 97.25. Active inventory, starting to go up a little, 24,863. Pending is at 3,760, and closed units month to date for the month of July, 1959. Taking a look at new listings taken this past week, up 28%. Last week, if you remember, we were talking about that the listings were pretty much shut off that week. 1862 is what we took this past week. Days on market for active is at 92 and closed at 78. Down the lower left-hand side, the price range for active inventory, the month-end inventory later today, or I should say the month-end report later today, will show this as the total closed production and broken down by price range. But you can see there were 5 price ranges that did take a contraction. Those are in red, mostly your $800,000 and up inventory. So looking at the total inventory, we have $0 to $600,000 properties represent 67.93% of the entire MLS. $600,000 to $1 million is at 19.35, and $1 million and up is at 12.72. Taking a look at our spreadsheet, where hopefully everything begins to make sense for everybody. The reasoning is in the very center columns, of course. We have 2025 same week and 2024 same week for that overall annual look-back perspective. To the left, we have week-over-week analysis, and then the blue columns, those are the ones that typically obviously get updated once a month. But those also give us an opportunity to see how month-over-month is doing, and also month-over-month last year. So there's a lot of information on this page to help you identify market trends, changes, things like that. Or, of course, you can just listen to the webinar, and we'll be happy to feed you the narrative. But 2,400 is the number of rules of thumb that we're looking for active listings. 1862 is just way off the market. However, taking a look to the right in the prior year columns, 1,846 and 25, so we're about the same as we were last year. And, of course, just a wee bit below the 2024 numbers. Active inventory is at 24,863. We were at 24,674 last week, 25,563 last year. So obviously we have about 3% less inventory this year than we had the year before. Coming soon is representing 467 units of the total active inventory at 24,863. Looking at single family detached is at 18,790. New home construction at 2,401, and non-distressed properties at 24,306, or 97.8% of the entire MLS. Taking a look at pending numbers, we're at 3,760. So last week we talked about the fact that listings were low. We only had 1,455 listings taken, and we made that we attached that to the fact of a seasonal cycle. We have usually in July, that's when a lot of executives, a lot of companies and corporations allow their executives to take time off. That's usually the more desirable time for the executives or the people, because they have children that are out of school. So not a lot of activity usually happens in a couple of weeks during that particular portion of the year. Again, as those have come back a little bit to 1862, we're looking at pending. Pending represents the buyers in the marketplace. And these are actually properties that are pending right at this particular moment, or under contract, accepting backup offers, or, even contingent sales. But 37, so this is the representative of the number of people that are actually in escrow at any point in time. And this changes daily as we look at the numbers. So when we're looking at 3760 versus 3918 last week, obviously some properties have either fallen out of escrow or they've closed, one of the two. But we look at this again, representing it not really so much week over week as we do month over month. So if you look at last year, same period of 3,603, we're 760 properties more in escrow right now. So we could say there are 760 more buyers in the marketplace today than there were a year ago. And that's a lot of, when you're listening to NAR and you're listening to Homes.com and you're listening to Armless or anybody doing market presentations, when they're talking about pending, that's really what it means. And that's active, meaning actual. That's right now happening, because when we look at closed, the thing with closed is, in order for it to close today, unless somebody paid cash and escrow was on the ball and you could close close that thing in 7 to 10 days. Most of the time, it's a 30 to 45-day escrow period for the average buyer. So if we're closing product in July, it was written 5 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. So it's more representative of the business that was done in the prior month than it is the month of actual reporting. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the numbers, because I think it truly helps. Because when you see 3,760 properties, that are currently in escrow, and and you're wondering, well, okay, 1,959 of those have already closed in the month of July. Actually, sorry, you have to. Your mind starts to say, well, that's just not making any sense. And it doesn't make a lot of sense because, again, of that reason. So keep that in mind. Taking a look at overall statistics, and this is, month-to-date numbers now, 4.91 month supply versus a 3.4 the week over week. Taking a look at it from that perspective. We're looking at median sales, which is the bottom number.
We're not going to stop and talk about that number?
Would you like to?
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah, because it's your favorite buyer's market.
And it just supports my my theory.
Yeah. Well, here's what I have to say to that. A buyer's market, as far as defined by the real estate industry, NAR, any of the Cromford reports, is 6 months supply and higher. If you have a 4 month supply and lower, you're actually in a seller's market. And if you're between 4 months and 6 months, you're actually in a neutral market, which basically, again, to my favorite comment, is to the victor goes the spoils. In other words, the consumer who's better represented by the more knowledgeable real estate agent, that's the consumer that's going to win in the 4 to 6 month market.
Now,
so
I don't want to
that, Mike.
I don't want to add to your workload, but I think an interesting stat would be is taking a look at average concessions.
I like that.
Because for me, you can take a look at the number. Yep. We can go back and forth and talk about buyer's market, seller's market, because because I go by feel. I go by what I'm seeing, because I'm doing this day to day. But those what I'm negotiating in seller concessions and things like that really are the indicator of where I feel like the market is. When I'm seeing sellers give up concessions over and over and in big percentages, that's telling me we're closer to a buyer's market than a seller's market.
Well, take into consideration, and usually we have this conversation on this number, which is the list price to sale price retention, because this is the amount of money the seller retains, meaning when the seller accepts an offer, this number is the percentage of what's the difference percentage-wise between the list price at the time the seller accepted the offer and the offer amount or the sale price that's on the contract. So, normally, historically, way over on the left, 97.8 is what it is. So an average agent should always, as a buyer's agent, go in anticipating there's a 2% negotiate. Well, work with me.
But
that's
not concessions.
So,
okay.
But there is no Armless doesn't have a average concessions that you can go pull up as a code. To do that, and this is why you, Mike, I've always said, if you're representing a buyer, you've said it as well. If you're representing a buyer, it's a buyer's market to you. It better be a buyer's market to you. In other words, everything you do better be about the buyer, right? But if you're a listing agent, then your job is always retention, always keeping the maximum amount of list price you can. And only in those markets when we're truly in a seller's market, which is under 4 months supply, is when you're going to go over 100%, which we've seen in certain markets. But there's no number that I can pull. So here's what has to happen. A buyer's agent would have to pull up this, into the list price to sale price retention, and then, to your point, if it's in a neighborhood, go to the properties that have closed in the last 30 days, 40 days in that neighborhood, and then pull up every single one of those properties and look at what the concessions are. You are 100% absolutely correct in that. If you don't know these two numbers, I don't know how you write an offer for a buyer. So, good job, Todd.
Wow.
Hey, look at that.
Wow. I think that's the first time I've ever